But it is political season, which means we move to political conversations as well. We just talked about Kamala Harris. We played how she would like to address resources in a hurricane, equity. But it reminds us of plenty of times in which, at certain moments, she had an opportunity to say something unifying or important, but instead said this. Watch.
You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go.
I do believe that we should have rightly believed, but we certainly believe that certain issues are just settled. And that's why I do believe that we are living in real unsettled times.
The United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. In the North, we see a brutal dictatorship, rampant human rights violations, and an unlawful weapons program.
And with that, we have an alliance, apparently. Obviously, that
Just
was
like that.
a gaffe. The United States, unless there's breaking news we're three unaware of, does not have an alliance with North Korea. Kamala Harris, look, it's interesting. Is she the weakness of a potential Biden re-election campaign in 2024? Well, that's actually debatable in so many different ways, because Joe Biden's own cognitive ability is now subject to very appropriate debate. And then you say, well, I think it's worth asking, is she actually a great insurance policy for Joe Biden? Like, who wants to move from Biden to what you just watched on your television screen? Or would it help Biden to replace Kamala Harris in a re-election campaign? Bill Maher said that's actually the ticket, that's the key, replace Kamala Harris.
I got to tell you, he's not giving it up. No, I mean, he waited a very long time. He's like Dracula. I have crossed oceans of time. I have crossed oceans of time to be the president.
Right.
Once you have that real estate and you wake up in the White House and your office is the Oval, I just don't think you give it up. It's very hard to take the nomination away from the president.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Sitting president. And what I could see is replacing the vice president, because she's just not very popular anywhere. And it didn't seem to work out. And I don't know, that's been done before on a ticket. I just think she's a bad politician.
Interesting take from someone who's usually a de facto, well, he's become much more of a free thinker and an explainer of the things the left should see for themselves, but they can't admit or the media won't talk about because they cover for them. In this case, first of all, Biden and Harris are both terrible on top of the ticket, regardless. I find it almost impossible to believe the modern Democrat Party could remove the first black female as vice president without open revolt inside the party of identity politics, because they can't do merit anymore. You watch her. How do you
explain the applause? Like, as interesting as what Bill Maher had to say, how about the applause from the studio audience at that suggestion?
Maybe his audience is changing.
Maybe.
I don't know. You're right. What do you think, Rachel?
You know, I think it's really interesting because he presumes. I disagree with a lot of the things that I don't think that Joe Biden is going to run in 2024. I don't think Joe Biden wanted to run in this last election. I think he was getting pressure from his wife, who was really intent on becoming First Lady. And I also think that he was getting pressure, we now know from emails that have come out, from his son and his brother, who were saying, they were, trying to leverage their own businesses to China and other places. And a lot of that was sort of telling those people in those other countries, those foreign governments, the Chinese Communist government, hey, listen, my dad, my brother is going to be the president of the United States. He was getting a lot of pressure. And of course, there was pressure within the Democrat Party who, were concerned that, Bernie Sanders could become the nominee. And they were concerned that, putting a self-identified socialists in the top ticket would hurt them in what was, clearly a very close election. So I think there was a lot of pressure. I've never seen a great desire on the part at this stage of his life, at this stage of his cognition for Joe Biden. I do not think he's going to run. I do think if they get rid of Kamala Harris, you will see, as Larry Elders has pointed out, a revolt among black women voters who will see this as a personal affront of pushing a black woman aside, who could then become possibly the next president.
I agree. I don't think Joe Biden, there's no way he can be their nominee. Maybe when Trump announces, they'll dig their heels in and say, we want to do that again, but that would only be the people behind Joe Biden, because anyone who's honest about what's happening before their eyes knows he's not capable of it. it's October 1st. Next month is the midterms. That will unleash a torrent of speculation.
Sure will.
From who should lead that ticket, who should go, will Donald Trump announce, who else announces? I mean, we are just on the cusp of a political season. And just when the left was telling us the red wave ain't going to happen, a lot of other news came in. A lot of people are pointing to when Ron DeSantis sent those illegals to Martha's Vineyard as far as crystallizing the conversation on illegality and then the crime in America and inflation. The economy continues to go south. If those define the midterms, it could be a big Republican night, or now it'll be weeks at this point based on our elections, and that reshuffles the whole deck as far as what's viable.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.